accessible streets for a visually impaired person might mean something very different compared to accessible streets for somebody with a mobility impairment, for example. But actually, I think that we could all try together to define what accessible streets mean for all of us, you know, so that we can then have discussions with non-disabled people and say, well, look, we all need to agree about these things. These are the things that disabled people say are necessary to have accessible streets. And if we make sure that these things are there, then every other changes are okay in a way, because they don't make things inaccessible. So let me just go through just a short amount of key important elements. So I think accessible streets mean we have to have accessible pavements. Everybody needs to start their journey on the pavement, and the pavement is very often not accessible to all sorts of disabled people. So we need to agree what accessible pavement, and also crossing the road, accessible crossing, that needs to be first and foremost. Every pavement and every crossing should be accessible, and at least we could start thinking about making active journeys. We also need accessible cycle lanes, because if we're going to use hand cycles, tricycles, tandems, but also people with mobility scooters who might not want to be on the pavement, who are finding the same problems with accessibility on the pavement, could be using cycle lanes if they were accessible. So for accessible streets, we need accessible pavements and crossings. We need accessible cycle lanes. We need accessible public transport, obviously, and we need to have our pavements and our cycle lanes all the way to public transport. You know, we need accessible ways to public transports, to stations, to bus stops, etc. And finally, but not least, as Mick was saying, we need accessible car parking and car access for drop-in and for drop-off and pickups. A lot of disabled people cannot access places today, and may never will, without being able to drive and or be driven to places. And we need to reserve and prioritize accessible parking and car access for those who need it the most. Those who don't need it the most, non-disabled people, we're very happy to help you convince them that they need to walk and cycle more, but we need accessible streets first and foremost, and then everybody else. As long as we are able to access our streets, we will be able to walk or push our wheelchairs, wheel and cycle more ourselves, but we will also be able to support the active travel discussion, and people will not be able to use us as a football to say, oh, well, disabled people like this or don't like this. We will have agreed with local authorities what accessible streets mean, and we can have agreement on that. So that's all I wanted to say at this stage. I'm very happy if you've got time and you wish to ask me questions, very happy to stick around and answer them, or very happy to come back. Basically, I'm from an organization which is very keen to help more disabled people to realize that cycling is an opportunity and is an option. We're not here to say that disabled people should cycle all the time. We just want people to have the option as part of a set of choices for modes of transport, just like anybody else, really. But I'll stop here. Thank you very much.